Charlotte Stevens got debilitating viral symptoms when she was just 19, and this led to 8 years of ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, and POTS. But Charlotte was dogged in searching for a cure, and she finally found her way to health. I'm Rebecca Tolin, a mind body coach and creator of the Be Your Own Medicine course. I am so grateful to speak with Charlotte today about her absolutely incredible recovery story. She tried conventional medicine, alternative medicine, and 3 brain retraining programs before she found me through this YouTube channel. A few months later, Charlotte was paddleboarding, camping, and hiking. Charlotte, thank you so much for being here today to tell your story.
Thank you so much for having me. It's like really nice to actually meet you and have this like conversation after watching your program and everything. It's pretty cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of coming full circle, right? Because you first
Yeah.
found me on YouTube.
Yeah, I was actually watching a recovery interview with somebody else that had done that had worked with you, and that's kind of how I found you. So it's really funny being on the other end of that now. Yeah, this is like the first time telling my story, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to go into the symptoms and kind of what you went through, but I'd like to just start out by asking, how are you feeling these days?
Pretty great. I mean, I just got back from Portugal on a 3-week hiking trip. Basically, we were walking along the coast with backpacks on and walking miles and miles and moving accommodation every few days. And I was kayaking and swimming in the sea, and I feel a bit like on top of the world from that. So that was pretty amazing. I'm feeling great, and so grateful to be able to do all of those things now, and like amazed at what my body can do.
That sounds so fun and invigorating. And I imagine there was a time it was inconceivable that you would ever be able to do those things again. So take us back to how these symptoms started and then progressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Me, like, if I could show 5 years ago me a video of me now, like that would have given me so much joy and hope knowing where I'd be now. So, yeah. So mine began when I was at university. I got glandular fever or mono, and then basically didn't recover from that, which is the age-old story that you hear, that people get ill and then don't recover. But yeah, so I was under a lot of kind of pressure with exams and the usual university things, and got ill, and then just the symptoms kind of got worse from there, to the point where I couldn't really do much. I couldn't leave the house. I wasn't able to work, and had all these crazy symptoms going on. I didn't really know what was happening to me. So yeah, that was kind of how it started.
Yeah, it sounds really terrifying. I remember reading that you were crawling up and down stairs at one point just because you didn't even have the strength to walk.
Yeah, I think my uni mates didn't really understand what was happening to me, because I was in like a shared house at the time, and I had to like shuffle myself down the stairs on my bum and crawl my way back up again, because my legs were just so weak and wobbly and felt like they were just gonna, well, they did sometimes just give way sometimes when I was walking up and downstairs, which was scary because, yeah, I didn't understand what was happening and no one else did.
Absolutely. And you're so young, and I imagine your friends were healthy and active and vibrant.
Yeah.
So, what happened when you went to doctors? First of all, what were the different diagnoses they gave you and treatment options?
So I think when I first went, they were kind of like, they gave me blood tests and found out that I'd had glandular fever, and said that sometimes it can take longer to recover. So I kind of was waiting. Well, it was kind of like post-viral symptoms, and was waiting to get over that. And then when I didn't, I kept going back and saying, I'm really not okay. Like, all of these things are happening, and I can't do my degree how I am, and kind of kept going back and asking them to look for more. And of course, they kept running tests, but nothing was coming up, as in like the thyroid things and stuff like that. It was all normal. So they were like, you're probably depressed. So they gave me questionnaire, for like a depression questionnaire, and of course I met the criteria because a lot of them overlap, because I was pretty unhappy about my life by that point because I was so restricted. So they offered me antidepressants at that point, and that was kind of all the advice they had to give me. And then I just kept going back and saying that it's not right, I'm not depressed, there's got to be something else. And finally saw a different doctor who had heard of ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and referred me to a CFS specialist who then diagnosed me.
It's incredible that happened to you so recently, because that's kind of the old horror stories we hear, that someone comes in with ME/CFS and is just told you're depressed, take antidepressants, and that apparently is still happening. So then when you were diagnosed with ME/CFS, and I know later fibromyalgia and POTS as well,
Yeah.
what did you try?
Well, the CFS specialist, I remember she was just like, stop uni, stop everything, offered me basically pain medication and sleeping tablets, and was like, this is your life now, was kind of like, just try and manage it the best you can. That's all they kind of had to offer. I think they offered me an online CBT course, and I remember feeling so much like, how is this going to help me? Like, the kind of things that were on that online thing were just, not helpful for me at all at that time. And none of the medications I found helpful. I just tended to get all the side effects from them. And the same with the POTS diagnosis. They obviously offered me beta blockers, but I didn't take them because I didn't feel comfortable with the side effects or with anything else. So I was kind of, all they were offering were these medications. So I was like looking for alternatives and thinking there must be something else I can do, because it didn't feel right. I don't know, it didn't sit right with me just taking a load of medication and putting up with things like, oh, this is just me now, I just take these things that don't really help, and carry on. So yeah, then I just started looking down the route of like nutrition-based things and more like functional medicine doctors, and looking at alternative ways to treat things.
Got it. Yeah. And were any of those helpful?
To an extent. I think I was kind of doing the same thing I did with doctors with the functional medicine practitioners, as in I ended up having a load of testing done. And of course, they were looking for like candida and mold and parasites and gut infections and all these things that were like reasons for why I was ill. And I was really buying into that at that time. And I did believe that it was because things did come back on my gut tests and things, that I had SIBO and various things. And I was like, oh, okay, if I treat all of that, then my symptoms will go. So I then went down, I was taking a ridiculous amount of supplements every day, and had like what are they called? The little pill boxes with things I needed to take, and a whole like schedule of things. I went on really restrictive diets. I tried like keto, paleo, or an autoimmune diet, a GAPS diet, all sorts of like different things that are supposed to kind of heal autoimmune stuff and gut disorders and stuff. But they all, I think, just made my life more restricted and made me really miserable at the end of the day. And I also had loads of side effects from the supplements as well. So I think it didn't help so much, but I guess I did take away some healthy habits in that reducing sugar and eating a bit more healthy and drinking more water and stuff would have helped my health overall.
Absolutely. I can relate to everything you're sharing, Charlotte, doing like having all the little supplement boxes and baggies and the restricted diets, and thinking that eradicating the candida or the mold or the bacteria was going to help, and that it didn't. And so I just want to be clear, because a lot of people actually really still are pursuing these things. Were you diagnosed with, you mentioned candida, SIBO, also mold and other things as well?
I wasn't diagnosed with mold because I don't think I went down the proper testing for that. But I was living in a moldy house. Like there was visible mold on the walls. So I was worried about that. And the person I was working with said that that was probably a possibility, that I had high levels of mold because of my environment. But I didn't go down that route. But I did, I had SIBO testing and took the medication for that, and I had Candida as well. And I think, if I'm honest, if I took a test now, it would probably still show SIBO or Candida or something. Like, I don't know that I haven't had it tested again to see that it's gone, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, when I had it tested, it was still there, and I haven't continued to test. So that would be interesting to know, but I would suspect it would still come back as being there. And yet I don't have the symptoms anymore. So
Exactly. And I'm so glad you're making that point that you even lived in a moldy house, because a lot of people are pursuing that. And I took all these chelating agents, and yet I recovered and you recovered. And so I don't, we see so many people recover. We've lived with these kind of agents in our environment for millennia. And I think that in this approach, we're really seeing it's the way the brain and nervous system are acting.
I should also mention that while I was doing your course, so like at the final part of my recovery, I was living in a static caravan that was full of mold. So I was still in mold while I was doing really well. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's very telling. Oh gosh. So, okay, you saw like the parasite cleanses and the diets and the supplements and medications were not helping and making it worse. And so it sounds like at some point you pivoted and you took a few different brain retraining programs. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what those were and how they went for you.
A lot of people had told me about the lightning process. That had come up a lot, and had said, oh, I heard about, I knew my niece's friend or whatever that had ME and did the lightning process and they recovered. And I kept hearing this, but I was really skeptical about it when I'd looked into it. I didn't buy into it, I think. I think I wasn't fully in it. And then I got desperate after doing all the supplements and dietary things that I was like, okay, I'm willing to give anything a go at this point. I keep hearing about this program, so I'm just going to give it a go. It was kind of my last resort kind of feeling. So I did that. I paid for it and I went and did it. And that made me feel even worse because I'd heard all these stories about people that had recovered within 3 days or had felt dramatically better after doing the 3-day intensive course, and that they could notice a shift in their symptoms. And I didn't notice anything. And when I kind of spoke to my coach that taught me it, she was kind of like, you just need to do it more. Like, you might have to do it 50 to 100 times a day. Just keep going with it and do it more and more and more. And I was just getting really this feeling like I'm not doing it right. That's what I kept feeling, like I must be doing something wrong because other people have recovered doing this and it's not working for me. And I think it left me quite frustrated. And then I very quickly jumped to another program because I'd got to this desperate, oh no, I've got to find something else to heal. And then I found ANS Rewire was the next one. I don't know how I came across that, but I did that same summer, and that was a lot more helpful in that it wasn't just the lightning process was just a brain retraining thing, like one brain retraining technique. That was basically the whole thing. Whereas ANS Rewire, he kind of talked about all of the different areas, like diet and relaxation and sleep and movement. And it was more of a holistic program. And I think I learned a lot from that. But still the core brain retraining technique didn't shift things for me.
And then you took one more brain training program after that, correct?
Yeah, so I think there was a bit of time in between that. Then I was kind of trying to apply the things I'd learned from ANS Rewire, and some time went by, and then I came across Primal Trust. And that was a lot more. I said the first one that I took came from not a very good place. It was people telling me to take it, whereas this felt more like, I really resonate with the feel of the program and what it's about and the concepts that it's talking about. And it was kind of more my choice to do it. I love what the program stands for. It's got really, really helpful stuff in it. And again, it's more holistic. It's got brain retraining stuff and more somatics. I think that's where I first came across like body-based and nervous system regulation, that kind of side of things, and like going into emotions, trauma, and things like that. But I found that a bit intense for me again, because I got into that pattern of I need to do all of these things to recover, otherwise I'm not doing it right. And I'd put a lot of pressure on myself that I need to be keeping up with the things in the program, and I'm not doing it enough, or I'm not doing all of the things I should be doing. So I again had some little, all of these things caused little shifts and little improvements, but nothing like big, if that makes sense. It was just like gradual shifts
in your symptoms, basically.
In my symptoms, yeah. And I think I was like generally learning more and more, and things were like clicking. It's like you're hearing the same thing, but in different ways, I guess. All of them are kind of have got the same message, the same core thing of what's going on, but it's all slightly different. So I think each time my brain's like, oh, and it's slightly sinking in a bit more.
Yeah, it can be like we get little pieces that kind of prepare us to have more of a breakthrough. And, I hear this a lot and can identify with what you're saying as being a TMS personality. That's a term John Sarno used, where we can tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves already. And so if there's kind of external situations putting pressure on us, or we perceive it that way, that can rev up the nervous system and kind of keep us stuck a bit. So I'm curious then what the turning point was for you.
So during my whole or most of my recovery journey, I was listening to recovery stories a lot. I think that's what kept me going through all of it. When I was like losing hope, and after years and years go by and I try all these things, I'm kind of feeling like nothing's ever going to work for me. I'm never going to recover. Those kind of thoughts start slipping in. So I would always keep myself watching recovery stories to be like, oh, if they can recover, maybe I can too. And I think there was always a bit of searching as well, of like trying to find out what other people had done to recover, that kind of thing. But it did keep my hope up. And yeah, so one day I watched a recovery interview with you and Chrissy, and everything that you said and she said in that interview really resonated. And like, I remember getting like shivers and being like, that's me, and like really like resonating with it so much. And I think I also had stumbled across Nicole Sachs around that time. Mm-hmm. So I was listening also to her podcasts and things around TMS and the mind-body world of things, and started reading those kind of books. And then I just, after that interview, felt like I really connected with you. There was something about your energy. You have such like a loving, warm, nurturing energy that I was just like, oh, I need to do this program. I don't know. I just felt really like it was for me. I had that feeling. So yeah, that's what led me to be your own medicine.
Those are such somatic signs of intuition, how you're describing goosebumps and then just kind of this warm feeling. And I love that you followed that, because I always encourage people to follow what feels right inside of them, because that is your healing path. So then you signed up for Be Your Own Medicine. It was our live cohort in 2023.
Yeah.
And how did that go?
Which is crazy that that's only a year ago. Like, so much has happened in a year. But yeah, literally, I remember crying at the first video. Because I remember like distinctly, because I still use this phrase now, or like, and I say it I now coach clients, but I say, what did you say? You and your efforts are enough. And that really, really hit me. And I started crying, and I was like, oh, my efforts are enough. Because I think up to that point, like I said, I'd put a lot of pressure on myself and felt like I was doing things wrong, and I needed to be doing more and work harder at recovery, this kind of, and I'm not doing things right. And you just, yeah, like I said, had such a like calming, nurturing presence. And it was like you're really speaking to my heart and saying like, you are enough, you are doing enough, you can you can take a breath. It was that kind of thing. Relax and know that it's going to be okay. It was that kind of feeling. And I really believed that.
Wow, that's incredible. It's so interesting how that's counterintuitive to the pressure we put on ourselves and often just the cultures we grow up in that is like no pain, no gain, and just kind of do more. And then we can transfer that into our healing journey. But what I found and what you're describing is that really learning to listen, attune to ourselves, be gentle with ourselves, offer ourselves compassion. First of all, it's just more supportive. It feels better, but also it really takes this pressure off the brain and the nervous system, which are generating the symptoms.
Absolutely. And I think that was key, that compassion, that gentleness was what was missing for me in my whole journey. I think like I said, I'd learned so much up until that point that I was like, I know it all. I kind of had this thing of like, no one's going to be able to tell me anything I don't know now. I know everything about the nervous system. I know like how to regulate. I know about trauma release exercise. I knew it all. But it was the way I was coming at it was still coming from like, I'm trying to achieve these things or do it perfectly or do it better. It was not coming from a compassionate, loving, gentle place. It was coming from quite a critical place, I think. And yeah, you talk about that a lot in your program about working with your inner critic and bringing in that compassionate self. And I think that was really important for me.
Yeah, just that lens through which we're looking at ourselves, our symptoms and our body can make all the difference. So I'm curious what teachings or aspects of the program or some of the practices that really helped you shift that dynamic, because these personality traits or what Gabor Mate calls coping mechanisms are pretty hardwired for a lot of us. So it's not necessarily we can just kind of snap our fingers and they shift. What really helped you in Be Your Own Medicine make this pivot?
I genuinely feel like a lot of it is your approach, your words, your energy just does like automatically, it has a calming effect. I don't know. It's like I said, it's like, I believe you that everything's going to be okay and that I can take the pressure off, I think. And I think the whole program feels like that. It's not pressurized. It feels gentle and nurturing, like holding. And the same with the whole group, like the people in it, the coaches in it, the group is so nurturing and warm and everyone's just the loveliest people. I don't know. It's just such a nice like energy. But in terms of like things that helped, I think that I hadn't got a grasp on how I was responding to my symptoms. I think that was a really big one of like seeing them through a lens of safety. You always talked about, instead of like responding with fear and fixing and fighting, it's responding with safety to the symptoms. I think that was really, really big. And especially I was still having crashes and dips, and being able to respond to those differently, I think made a massive difference. And understanding how to respond to symptoms, and also your emphasis on like play and joy and peace. And I think that was another big piece for me, that recovery had become really serious and like it's almost like a to-do list or a chore, or like I have to get better. Like this really, it wasn't fun. I'd kind of like stripped all the fun away and forgotten about prioritizing peace and play and things. I think because when you're ill for so long, it's almost like you don't allow yourself to have fun and play, almost because you feel like you're wasting time, or like you should be doing things to recover and then you can have fun once you're recovered. It's this weird like mindset. And I think you flipped that for me, that you were like, no, how can you have more peace and joy now, even with symptoms, and then recovery happens as a side effect. It's like a complete 180 way, it's a backwards way to how I was approaching it.
Absolutely. And that's so common. There's a physician in this mind body field, David Clark, who talks about in the years he saw people with ME/CFS, this very common trait he noticed was people had forgotten how to enjoy themselves and have fun and tended to be very intense people, working really hard, being very conscientious. I know I can relate to that. And then it's so kind of mind blowing to think, what if it is pretty simple as learning these symptoms aren't dangerous and I'm going to start doing the things I really enjoy again? And that is a path to healing. But the way then I react to the flare ups that will probably come when I do the things I want really matters, right? It really sends messages back through the nervous system to tell the brain, its subconscious brain and nervous system, whether those activities are safe for us or not. And so it sounds like you really embraced all these things. And I'm curious how you did that. So you were in the course and the live cohort was 10 weeks. How did you start implementing this where you were going back in your life and doing things you wanted to do?
I think a big key piece for me was the somatic tracking part of things. Was like you just said about how to respond when you start doing things, and like you may get symptoms once you start doing that, but how to see them through a lens of safety. The somatic tracking was what helped me get there. And yeah, all of the meditations in the program were what helped me then be able to respond from that place of safety and calm. And I think it was just me like thinking about what I wanted to do, what would be fun and what would I enjoy doing. And you have a really great kind of diagram in your program about safety zones and things like that. So that was always in the back of my mind of when I was going out to do things, I knew how to do it in a way that my nervous system could feel some level of safety. I wasn't going into an overwhelmed state, and bringing myself back to say, like, I had tools to bring myself back into safety when I needed to. So yeah, and then I just started going on more walks and sea swimming and spending more time with friends and living life, doing the things that I wanted to do, knowing that I had the tools to cope if symptoms came up. I think that was what was different. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And so, what would you do when symptoms would come up? What was really effective for you?
I think having that understanding of where they're coming from, what's causing them, so that I could always like remind myself, this is just my brain and nervous system, like feeling a bit unsafe right now. Like I am safe, it's okay. And it's almost like, I think it's that difference in the shift in the way that you speak to yourself that I became more compassionate in how I spoke. And it's almost like settling a scared child. That's how I like explain it now to others, that yeah, it's almost like when you've got symptoms, you get scared, you get everyone like, oh no, maybe I've done too much, maybe I've da 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 da. But when you can bring in that compassionate, calm understanding of like, no, it's okay, you're actually safe right now, we can go and do a yoga nidra or something that's going to make me feel more safe and calm, and I know that the symptoms will pass eventually. So I think having that understanding and that compassionate voice to kind of reassure myself, and using tools like your guided meditations or some like somatic holds or orientating, things like that, nervous system regulating tools were really helpful.
Yeah, fantastic. I know that you've mentioned the somatic tracking was helpful to you, and you like yoga nidra, which is also a very somatic practice. What role did the somatic meditations in the course or just somatic work play for you? Because I know I hear this a lot that some people actually make some progress, like you did with brain training, but then kind of get to this block where the symptoms aren't shifting a lot and they really want and need to include the body. And the somatic body is also where we experience emotions. So, can you talk a little bit more about what role that played for you?
I think I had been living very much in my head in general. So the brain retraining was still in my head. So I think it wasn't what I needed to do was get back into connection with my body and drop into my body, which I hadn't been doing, because brain retraining doesn't really tell you to do that. It's very much about addressing your thoughts. And I think that was needed, because that feeling of safety is a somatic feeling. It's in your body. It's not something that you can like think your way to. No matter what you say in your thoughts, you're not going to feel safe in your nervous system and your body if you're not in your body, connected to your body. So I think that the somatic tracking and yoga nidra is similar in that way, that it helps you connect to your body in a safe way and like feel safe to be in your body, which, like you said, is where your emotions are. So that's probably why I was up in my brain, because I didn't want to be looking at the emotions that were all stored in my body. So it was kind of avoiding that. And I know another part of your program is about looking at these emotions and journaling and things like that. And I was actually very resistant to that, because there's kind of two routes, and I would go very much down the meditation route, because I was like, oh, this makes me feel nice and it's calming and lovely. And like, yeah, I'll get round to the journaling. I was definitely very avoidant and resistant to that at first. But I was aware that I needed to do it. Like I'd written my lists, and I knew that there was a lot there that needed to be gone through. But I think I needed that feeling of safety first to feel okay to be with those emotions.
Yes.
But yeah, that definitely also played a part to be able to be with my emotions, to allow them to allow myself to feel angry or to cry or whatever was there and needed to come up, and learning how to be with that and how to process those emotions in a healthy way was, yeah, really helpful for me as well.
Yeah, and that's why I created two pathways in the course, the meditation pathway and the writing pathway, because it is really important to feel resourced and safe before we go into practices that are more provocative or challenging. And it sounds like you had a great natural intuition about the order of things for you. Did you find that you were mostly processing emotions that were coming up just in the present moment, or did you go back and write or meditate on some of, the backlog of emotions from everything you lost when you were at university and all these years in your 20s, and whatever other emotional stressors were coming up in your three lists?
Yeah, I think a bit of both. I think it's almost a case of once you start allowing those emotions, they tend to come up. It's like you've like let the lid off or something. So things would just come up at random times, or and I also was actually working with a therapist as well at the time. So we were working through a lot of the emotional side of things, because I would, yeah, sometimes I would start journaling on stuff and things would come up. So then I would talk about it with her and we'd work through some things as well. But I think sometimes it wasn't always about what I was writing, or like I didn't even know what it was about, if that makes sense. It would just be some emotions would come, like I'd have a lot of waves of anger actually, and I have no idea why. Like it was almost like all this anger that I hadn't allowed myself to feel was suddenly then coming up. And I remember having to like you included some somatic like videos for releasing anger and feeling your anger, and that was really helpful. I remember doing a lot of that, a lot of anger practices, rage stuff, but I didn't necessarily know what it was about. Like I didn't have something that I was angry about to write about. It was just a feeling that needed to be processed. And the same with, sometimes I would feel like a real big sense of loss and grief, and I wouldn't necessarily know what it was about. But I think you just hit the nail on the head then when you said a lot of the time I was ill and the loss of my 20s and stuff, that was definitely something that needed to be grieved and allowed, that it was hard. Like the whole journey was really, really hard and really scary, and I didn't understand what was going on. And there was a lot of sadness there that I don't think I'd felt because I was in survival mode. I was like trying to just get out of that situation. So then when I looked back, I was like, oh wow, yeah, that was tough. And to be honest, I'm still working through that now. I just had a birthday, and that brought up some more of that sadness of kind of missing my 20s, that kind of feeling. And yeah, so it's definitely a continual process, the grieving part of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And really what to me is so empowering about this work is we have the tools. And so as life progresses after your recovery journey, it's like you know how to be with the emotions. And actually, we can feel more emotions because now we have more capacity, right? And our brain and nervous system know that. And so more emotions can come up, but they can be processed, right? So they don't have to be stored and expressed as symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
Beautiful.
that's the difference now. Instead of symptoms, I'm punching pillows, or I'm having a cry, or
Oh, yeah. I love that release your anger practice that's in the course. We're like breathing and kind of almost like punching and moving. And yeah, it can really move energy. And the thing is, you don't necessarily have to know the story. So I'm so glad you said that. Because I think a lot of times people worry, I'm going to have to go back and turn over every stone and look at every trauma. And it's not that way. It's like whatever's present now is from the past, right? It's whatever was kind of unintegrated or assimilated in the past, and it comes up now.
Mhm.
So you did a deep dive. One thing I want to ask you is about the different symptoms and diagnoses you had, because a lot of people, as you know, in the beginning, when you learn this approach, we're still applying this allopathic model, like, but what do I do for dysautonomia? But what do I do for fatigue? But what do I do for pain? And then, my answer starts becoming really the same things because they're all generated by the brain and nervous system. So, with these kind of three main diagnoses you had of POTS, CFS, and fibromyalgia, did you find the symptoms associated with all of those just started kind of resolving at the same time through this approach? Or were there different nuances that you needed for different symptoms?
I think that I'd kind of not got on top of, but the POTS had kind of subsided a lot by that point, just because probably a lot of nervous system regulation stuff I was doing, but also I was drinking a lot of water and things like that. I don't know, supporting my body. But I think I'd done enough nervous system regulation that wasn't as much of a problem for me at that point. And so it was more like the fibromyalgia and the CFS. And I do remember, I think I even asked in the forum thing, that I get how you can apply it to like headaches and pain, and like that seemed quite obvious, but the fatigue was so just all day, like a general like malaise feeling, that I didn't understand how to apply it to that. So I think that felt different, like the application, but it was still the same at the end of the day. Like he said, I think I understood that more and more, that it's all the nervous system, it's all the same thing. But I think I do remember having like a problem with the background fatigue, if that makes sense. Like there's a difference between when you crash or you have like quite strong fatigue symptoms, it's kind of easier to know how to apply it. But the all day fatigue was like, what do I do for this? But I think that was definitely a case of, that was something that just faded over time as I applied all the things anyway. It was kind of not looking for it to just go after I'd done the tools or done the thing. It just kind of happened as a consequence over time that went, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It completely makes sense. What this is like a year out from when you took the course. And I know you've been very active in this last year. So first, let's talk about, how you're feeling now and how you do respond to any symptoms that emerge. And then I want to ask you about what you're up to now.
So yeah, I think the last year even has been dramatic in like the shifts and the way that things have changed already. So like the answer I'd give you now is different to at the end of the program, let's say. So now it's not so much that I wouldn't even say that they were symptoms. I just get tired like people do kind of thing. But I know that if I am feeling a bit more tired than I would consider normal tiredness, I know that it's because I'm running one of those personality patterns. It's that I've been pushing myself too hard and getting into a like, I need to do this and this and this and this, and not taking the rest breaks and not listening to what my body's actually wanting. It's almost like a signal from my body being like, slow down and take care of yourself, please. Like, don't go back down that route. It's almost a little warning signal of like, this doesn't end well, slow down.
Yes.
So I can recognize that now and be like, okay, I need to like take some things off my to-do list or slow it down a bit or take some time for me. And it's not that it's not that I can't handle doing loads. I can. can do a ridiculous amount now, but it's that the whole part of this journey for me was teaching me to not do that, as in to just keep going and going and going and ignoring my body and not taking time to rest or even play or have that moments of peace. So I learned that on my journey, but once you recover and have all this energy, sometimes you can forget that, or I do occasionally because I get caught up in the whirlwind of life of like, it's amazing, I can do so many things, I'm just going to keep going kind of thing. I have to kind of like reel myself in sometimes and be like, it's almost like, remember your training. Remember that we need balance, and we also, like, humans need downtime and rest and play. And I think those things aren't valued in our society or our culture, that productivity is valued and it is like doing all of the things. And it's almost like when people are like that, we're like, wow, you're amazing, how do you do it all? It's almost praised, when really we should be valuing and praising taking time to rest. And I don't mean rest lying down, it could be being in your garden or going for a beach walk, or restful things, peaceful things, and making time for that and valuing that as much as doing.
Exactly. And that's what I'm really hearing, Charlotte, is like you've gleaned the wisdom of the symptoms. So then the chronic symptoms can leave. They've kind of served their purpose. And I so relate to, again and again, every day practicing these principles and sometimes forgetting and being like, oh, I can do all these things now. And then now, very similar to how you described, when I get symptoms, it's always like there's a message every single time. It's like, you're not playing enough. You're not having enough fun. You're sitting too long in front of your computer. It's really not haphazard, or like you need some space for your emotional side, because there's been a lot of emotional experiences in your life, or it's like almost instant. When I pause, I kind of know what it is. And then in that way, I'm grateful for the symptoms, because they're a barometer of how much I'm kind of staying centered and grounded and true to my whole self, but not the self you're talking about that's like the cultural self that we're trained to be.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference now with the symptoms, that before I think I was kind of like, they have no reason, as in like they were all the time. So it wasn't like something cropped up and I go, oh, okay, I haven't done this, and I do it and then it's gone. It was just all the time. So it was harder to make sense of. Whereas now, like you say, it's like instant. I know instantly, like that's cropped up. Oh, okay, I know that I've been doing that or not doing that. And then I do it. So it's way more, it makes sense, and you just learn what your body's wanting and needing. And yeah, when you said about sitting in front of the screen too long or something like that, or I was also thinking about one of mine that I had to learn was to say no, like not do things that I don't want to do, because I think that I noticed symptoms would come up if I tried to do that. So
Absolutely. There's that really wonderful book by Gabor Mate, When the Body Says No. And the premise of that is your body will say no for you if you don't say no to the things you don't want to do. And in kind, too, our body says yes when we're playing or doing something that's really enjoyable for us. And so, speaking of that, I'm curious what you are up to now. You've told us about your recent backpacking trip around Portugal, which sounds incredible. What other fun adventures have you been on? And also, what are you doing in your work life?
Yeah, so I've done loads over the last year because I feel like I think after the program, like you mentioned over summer, I was kind of like going camping and going to festivals and weddings and stuff. And I think that was me like trying to expand myself and get that joy and get back to living life and things like that. And I think continuing on from then, it's almost like I've got this new body that I'm like taking out. It's like I've got a new car or something, and I'm like, let's see what it can do. So I've just been kind of like doing more and more and more, like climbing up higher peaks, or like, okay, I've done that one. What's next? It's almost like wanting to experience life, I guess, and like all the things that I've missed out on and wanted to do. I'm doing it now. I'm really like grabbing life by the reins kind of thing. And yeah, so just a lot of being outside, I think, has been what I was missing the most, spending time in nature and going on really big walks or going kayaking. And I've been bouldering, like rock climbing and things like that. And yeah, work wise, so this isn't something that I ever imagined when I was at uni and started this journey, but through learning everything that I did, through all the many programs I did in the books and whatever, and then taking your program and other programs, I got really passionate about this work, like mind body stuff, the nervous system regulation side of things. And I'd started an Instagram page just as like a just to share what was helping me, basically. And then that kind of grew from there. And now I'm coaching people on recovering from ME and CFS and various symptoms. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing now, working online, doing that. And I absolutely love it. It's like so fulfilling. And I almost feel like I'm giving back in a way, because like people helped me so much along my recovery journey, and now I get to do that for others, and that's such an amazing feeling, as I'm sure you know.
Oh, yes, that's so beautiful. I mean, you've earned all that wisdom, and I agree. It's just the best to be able to sort of give that back. It just feels part of this cycle of healing and thriving and restoration, that you can share what you've learned with others. Oh, Charlotte, Arlette, you've given us like so many gems. Is there anything else you want to leave people with who, are still struggling with these symptoms, whether it's POTS, CFS, fibromyalgia, or any of these other mind-body symptoms?
I think always never give up hope. Like no matter how long it's been, how bad you think things are for you, like don't give up hope. You can recover. It is possible. And to not be so hard on yourself. I think that's the overall message of like be gentle on yourself and kind, and yeah, have that loving, nurturing warmth for yourself, because it's hard and you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you so much. You just embody that nurturing, loving essence yourself. So it's really lovely to meet you. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, as you can hear, it is possible to recover from severe symptoms and get your life back. And in many ways, it's easier than we think. It can involve play and peace and pleasure, and really getting the support of understanding how your brain and nervous system work, and kind of giving your somatic body some gentle supportive practices. If you do want help, you can now take my Be Your Own Medicine program, either as a live cohort or a self-paced course. But whatever you do, just keep following your glimmers of hope and healing and whatever lights you up. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.